Members and guests, may I have your attention please? Thank you. Please continue to enjoy your lunch while we hear from our guest speaker, Alberto Calderon. But to introduce Alberto, would you please welcome to the stage Patrick Smith, the Managing Director of AMC Consultants. Welcome, Patrick.
It's great to be here at the start of Melbourne Mining Club's 18th year. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Orica is the world's largest supplier of commercial explosives and blasting systems, with operations in every major mining market, supporting their customers across about 400 sites in more than 100 countries around the world. Alberto Calderon joined the Orica board in 2013, and he was appointed CEO in May 2015, bringing leadership experience from across the mining, petroleum, energy, and electricity sectors. Prior to joining Orica, Alberto was an executive with BHP, where he held key leadership positions, and these included Group Executive and Chief Executive, Aluminium, Nickel and Corporate Development, Group Executive and Chief Commercial Officer, and President, Diamond and Specialty Products. He was also Chief Executive Officer at Cerrejón Coal Company, which is an integrated thermal coal mine in his home country of Colombia, and at the Colombian oil company, Ecopetrol. Prior to this, Alberto held senior leadership positions in the IMF and in the Colombian government, and he has been a board member for a range of private, public, and non-government organizations. He holds a PhD in economics, a Master of Philosophy and Economics, a Master of Economics from Yale University, Juris Doctor in Law, and a Bachelor of Economics from Andes University in Colombia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alberto Calderon to the stage.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Patrick, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also acknowledge our distinguished guests today, including the patron of the mining club, Sir R.V. Pabo. It is an honor to be addressing again to you today. I was at the last Melbourne Mining Club event in December when we celebrated the 100th club event. It is fitting today, in the first of the next 100 speeches, we revisit the industry's contribution to Australia's prosperity and consider some of the challenges our nation faces to maintain our standard of living. And I do say our nation, given that I'm close to becoming permanent resident in Australia. It'll be a happy day. So let me, fortunately, the 457 visas allowed me that. It's a path that is now closed, unfortunately for the rest. Anyway, let me begin by exploring what is at stake. Australia is experiencing the longest period of sustained economic growth for at least the past 50 years. In 2007, we recorded 26 years of uninterrupted economic growth. This far exceeds the booms of the 1970s and 80s, which lasted only 8 years and makes us unique among developed countries. To put this in a workplace perspective, Australian-born employees younger than their mid-40s have never experienced a recession in their working lives. For them, the impact of major economic shocks is something observed from afar. Australia cruised through the Asian economic crisis in the late 1990s, and we actually grew through the dot-com bubble burst and when the US entered a recession in 2001. Our economy continued to grow through the 2008 global financial crisis, and our GDP growth since the GFC has exceeded the rate of most major developed countries, including the US, the UK, the EU region, and Japan. So what has driven our economic resilience and prosperity? The distinguishing factor has been private business investment. Private business investment. Data from the Reserve Bank show that investment as a percentage of the Australian economy rose to a multi-decade high around 2012. This contrasts with the experience in nearly every other country, with the exception of China. And it is not by accident this coincided with the once-in-a-lifetime resources boom. Private investment from the mining sector peaked at around 9% of the economy, and the Minerals Council of Australia estimate that more than $400 billion was invested in mining, energy, and infrastructure projects. The other strong contributor to investment growth was, of course, residential construction, ownership and dwellings. We have enjoyed a long period of growth and dodged the economic shocks that have impacted other countries. And so now what for the future? The fundamental drivers of our performance, mining investment and housing construction, have peaked and actually have declined. Mining investment is expected to remain at its more normalized long-term level of around 3% of GDP. So from 9% at the peak to 3% today, and it should stay around those levels. And residential construction is forecast to experience a negative growth in the coming years. So where will our future growth come from? In very general terms, economies grow and living standards rise when households are spending, business is investing, and net exports are growing. Let's look briefly at the largest element of the economy, consumption. While household consumption has contributed solely to GDP growth in volume terms, growth in household expenditure is almost the lowest on record, and the outlook is not good. Our savings ratio at 3% is the lowest it has been in almost 60 years, with the exception of the early years of the 2000s. And our household debt to GDP ratio is among the highest of the developed world. Even if we avoid a housing price crash, the low savings ratio and high private debt level imply that household consumption will contribute significantly less to growth than in the past decades. The outlook for net exports is also subdued and likely to be a drag on growth. The current account deficit is forecast to grow to somewhere between 3% and 4% in the medium term. Government spending is supporting growth and could reach almost 19% of GDP. However, as we all know, long-term growth does not come from the public sector. Sustainable growth can only come via the private sector, and given that this will not come from mining or housing, it must come from non-mining investment. Guy Debelle, the Deputy Governor of the RBA, recently delivered a very good speech on business investment in Australia. He highlighted that non-mining business investment as a percentage of GDP is currently at its lowest since 1960, around 9% of GDP. His explanation is that expectations of weak future conditions are plausibly restraining business investment even more than current conditions, and that I quote, there are signs that the generalized improvement in business sentiment is leading to a global reassessment of investment decisions. That is diplomatically speak for saying there's better conditions elsewhere. The conclusions are clear. The main drivers of growth during the past 2 decades, mining and housing, will no longer contribute at the same level, and housing consumption will not be able to fill the gaps. This underscores the need to create the right conditions to boost business investment and capital productivity. But under the current tax and regulatory environment, it is difficult to see how business investment is going to fill the void left by the mining and housing sectors. We need a tax environment that is conducive to growth and is competitive relative to the countries against which we compete for capital. Doing nothing will not awaken the animal spirits that De Bell mentioned in his speech. Doing nothing will in time, maybe not next year, but certainly in the near future, without a doubt, lead to very low levels of growth. I'm not necessarily suggesting we blindly follow the United States in its tax strategy. There should be more discussion around the optimal combination to create the greatest benefit for society and the largest impact on investment growth. There is a view that a reduction in the corporate tax would result in increased investment activity, the creation of more jobs and higher wages. However, our franking system makes the analysis a little bit more complex. If we simply pass on any tax cut to shareholders through increased dividends, instead of financing new investment, the benefit to the investor is offset by reducing franking credits. The impact will also be particularly relevant for retirees whose income projections rely on the imputation credits at 30%. There are, however, complementary or alternative ways to encourage local and offshore companies to invest in Australia. Companies invest to expand their operations, build new plants and factories, buy equipment, and develop new technologies to boost productivity. It would seem to me that introducing targeted incentives in areas such as these can directly increase activity in Australia in a way that provides lasting benefits. This could be achieved by improving the Australian research and development incentive, introducing better capital allowances either directly or through accelerated depreciation, or targeted reductions in tax rates for capital-intensive or high-technology manufacturing. A tax environment that incentivizes investment will benefit all Australians through job creation, increased wages, and improved living standards in the long term. Changes to the tax regime alone will not, however, induce long-term sustainable economic growth. If we are to support private investment, our regulatory regimes for energy, labor, transport, water, land access, telecommunications, and other infrastructure services need to support, not add to the cost and timeliness of projects and the cost of operations. It's equally important that access to mobile and skilled workers is not hampered by populist politics. While these matters fall largely to governments, the task of value and wealth creation sits squarely with the industry. We are responsible for creating the jobs and value to support our living standards. So what must we as industry, as the nation's wealth creators, do to sustain our advantage? We know value is maximized when countries focus on their comparative advantage. Australia, as we all know, is a global resources powerhouse. While there is an urgent imperative to lift investment in the non-mining sector, we must not lose sight of the importance of the resource industry to our economy. By building on our natural advantage and global scale, the resources industry can continue to contribute to growth and living standards. We are already responding to that challenge. Our industry is being reimagined. Robotics, automation, big data, and the Internet of Things are transforming every element of our value chain. from exploration, mining, and processing to transport. New technologies are delivering significant advances in safety, environmental, and productivity outcomes. We are lifting utilization rates, operating more precisely, reducing maintenance costs, and increasing asset life. The opportunity for individual companies and the broader economy is significant. At a company level, innovations is extending my life, improving bottom-line financial, safety and environmental performance, and making our business more resilient and globally competitive. For Australia, the opportunity is to establish ourselves as a global leader in mining automation, expand our mining services sector, increase our knowledge-based experts, and apply our experience to other sectors. We have a comparative advantage in natural resources. We have the necessary human capital and expertise. Australia is a natural hub for mining innovation. Orica has a unique vantage point and role to play in this transformation. We are an Australian-based global mining services provider with a long history and strong commitment to innovation. We spend a lot of time with our customers, listening to what is driving them and finding ways to deliver change that is important for them. Our expertise is blasting, and history shows that blasting can contribute significantly to productivity and safety. The introduction of ammonium nitrate as a bulk explosive in the 1950s and 60s was critical to the commercial development of large open-cut mining operations. The growing use of emulsions in the late 1980s lifted productivity again, and in the early 2000s, Orica commercialized electronic detonators, which delivered the next big step change in blasting precision. It's interesting, though, that blasting is one of the few processes in the mining value chain that largely remains untouched by automation. Our customers are working to change that, and so are we. Last year, we commercialized the world's first wireless detonator, the WebJane 100. We believe this breakthrough is at least as big as any of the major milestones I've just listed, and it will put our customers one step closer to true automation. WebJane uses wireless technology to initiate blasts through rock, water, or air from surface controls. With the manual task of connected wires removed, our customers are removing people from harm's way and eliminating productivity losses caused through damaged wires. The use of this technology has allowed one of our customers in North America to alter the mining sequence in their underground mines, delivering significant productivity gains. The automation of drill and blast will be a game changer for the industry, just like the introduction of ammonium nitrate was in the 1960s. We're proud of the role we're playing alongside our customers as they deliver this transformation, and we're excited by the benefits it will deliver to us too. In Australia, for example, we ended last year on a high note with the win of a significant BHP iron ore contract in Western Australia, and started the year with the win of the Roy Hill contract, also in Western Australia. Our contract with BHP includes a technology partnership through which we develop, trial, and introduce new technologies. This will support BHP's ability to incrementally bring automation and technology to bear on their drilling and blasting challenges. Only we have the technology building blocks to support their ambitions, and we're excited to have been selected as their partner to help achieve such an important breakthrough. Another major theme we're responding to is big data. Our customers collect huge volumes of data in mine sites, but only a fraction of it is used. Part of their frustration is that the data often remains disconnected in disparate systems owned by customers and service providers. There's an obvious opportunity to change that. If our customers can capture and analyze data from right across the value chain, they can fully understand the impact blasting has on other parts of the mining value chain. And because blasting is so early in the value chain, the potential to improve overall mining productivity is very high. Our BlastIQ product brings together data from existing systems. It puts information about the impact of each blast in the hands of the teams that manage the blast. When they can measure the value of their decisions, they can start to close the continuous improvement loop to achieve better safety and productivity. These are merely two examples from a rapidly changing world. The full potential for change is yet to be explored. Australia has an opportunity to be at the forefront of industry transformation, but we need a regulatory environment, a tax environment that is attractive to capital investment and that promotes and rewards investment in technology and innovation. This will be key to ensuring we not only remain competitive against other countries, but that we also leverage our strengths in human capital and innovation to build on our natural advantage and global scale in resources and continue to contribute to Australia's economic success. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alberto. Dan, can we have some lights up, please, so we can see some Q&A? There you are. Now, what we have out here on the floor is Richard Shoddy on one side, Sam Street on the other side. If you have a question, would you please just help us out by standing, identify yourself, and we'll go from there. So, Richard Shoddy, you have the first question, I believe. That might be Owen Hegarty.
Thank you. Thank you, Alberto. Absolutely outstanding address and a terrific wake-up call, actually, for the industry and the regulator to continue to improve our competitiveness. So well done there. Well done to you and your firm, by the way, for your support for the mighty EMR Capital and our 8 worldwide projects here in Australia and other parts of the world in copper, gold, coking coal and potash. So terrific support and great technology and great service. So well done with all of that. The question is, when it comes to resource nationalism, for example, it raises its head from time to time, particularly in a rising market, and how you as a service provider, strong technical capability and service provider, not involved in the mining company per se in terms of an ownership position, how you are dealing with that around the world in the resource nationalism context that requires companies who are operating there to use local contractors and that type of thing?
I would probably answer in 2 parts. One, the more general, and I agree with you, the concern. We're starting to see sort of the tax appetite of changing the rules again in these sort of what I think is a bit of a temporary boom. You're seeing it in different regions of the world, and that's something that mining companies are aware of, and it's a permanent fight. And the sad thing about that is that sometimes countries think that is sort of a free lunch, but it always comes back to haunt them, and you lose reputation quickly, and it takes decades to build one. So hopefully they can manage through that. We are, because our very technical nature of what we do, we're less exposed to that. And usually people don't mess with explosives. So we're a bit protected from that point of view. So we're there to support our customers, and when we can, we will support them even publicly, like we've done in the past when here in Australia they were trying to change the rules in Western Australia. So we'll continue to do that.
Sam Street, you have Sam Street right there.
Peter Harris from the BRC Group. I asked this from not a pro-coal or anti-coal perspective, but just from an investment perspective. Whenever you see the hashtag Stop Adani, it's followed by the hashtag No New Coal. So the Adani process has gone through 112 regulatory approvals, all ticked off, 10 appeals, all rejected. So to kill the Adani project, either the Queensland or federal governments can have to change the rules. If they did change the rules to kill the Adani project, what do you think would be the wider implications for sort of brownfield or greenfield extensions for the rest of the mining industry? Thanks.
Let me start probably by a more general appreciation on coal. And there's a wonderful article that if you Google it, it's by an Australian Jesuit. And so Catholic, like I am. And he basically says it's anti-Christian to be against coal. And it is, I feel, coming from a developing country, when you have really what's happening with thermal coal exports into India or Thailand and Indonesia, and you're really substituting basically wood and all the implications for lung diseases and all of that for power, when you're really bringing power to what's happened to hundreds of millions of people, I think the debate starts getting a bit different. And so I feel quite strongly about that, that countries have a right to develop and have a right to there's still 1 billion poor people without electricity, and getting them the most affordable electricity, if it's from thermal coal, and good quality thermal coal like from Australia, is a good thing. Now, if you go into the Adani project, it's I don't know why it's been so polarizing. I think if you have a good investor, we actually have a good relationship with them, and I think that there should be no legitimate reasons to stop them. Now, I don't want to get into the issue of how much government should support them. I usually are more cautious on that. I think business should itself need to be able to fund things. But overall, I would probably go back to the main theme. I think I see in the next 10 years Australian thermal coal with a solid future. It's not going to grow like in the past, but it's still going to be growing maybe 0.5%, 1%, because of its high quality and because it's needed in many parts of the world.
Okay, Richard, you have a question here?
Yes, I have a question here from the students' table, the future leaders of the industry.
Hi Alberto, thank you for your address. I'm Alison Davis, I'm a PhD student at Monash University. You spoke about how workers younger than their mid-40s have never experienced a recession in their working lives. With increasing levels of automation as you described, how do you see the future of the workplace evolving for employees in the resources industry?
Thank you for the question. Interesting. Probably start addressing this with an example which I find quite interesting. So ATMs, the teller machines, really came to fruition around the 80s. And if you go back to the discussions then, it was the end of the teller. So there was not going to be any more tellers after that, and it was sort of said, okay, this is very good, but it's going to create some harm to employment. The actual fact is that there's more tellers more now than before. What happened with the tellers is that they were, yes, per unit of bank they were reduced, but there's many more branches that because it was now much more competitive. More important, the skills of the teller changed. So they're now much more into customer relationships than just dispensing cash. I believe that's what should happen if there's no, let's say, obstacles from old sort of labor practices. This is what will happen with automation. We will have a much more diverse, a geographically dispersed, and a digitally connected workforce. And I think it's exciting. Yes, there's going to be change, and change sometimes is difficult, but we will end up with, I believe, on average, more exciting jobs, as I said, more upscale jobs than before, and that's going to be good for everybody.
Sam up the back right corner.
Thank you.
Sean Rooney from the Department of Economic Development, State Government of Victoria. Alberto, you spoke about the opportunity for Australia to be a global centre for mining innovation. What do you see as the role for mining equipment, technology and services in that vision, and how do we capture that value in Melbourne and, more importantly, over Victoria?
Look, I think the conditions, as I see them now and what's happening and more what's going to happen in the next, let's say, 3 or 5 years, is that the discussions with miners have shifted from volume growth, let's say, throughout 2005 to 2012. Then from 2013, 14, it shifted to survival and cost cutting. And now that we know what we need is productivity, let's say the big China thing is not going to happen again, but there is still a lot of value to be had by being more productive. And then technology, automation is part of this. So we at Orica see this very closely and see how most large mining companies, not all, but most, have shifted their interaction with us from cost cutting and what is the lowest to what can add the most value. I think as customers pool this technology, we're going to be, and we're doing it, and I mentioned that with BHP, investing more ourselves in how we can, for example, accelerate this world that is coming quickly of automating drilling and blasting. So it's pretty exciting. Now, there could be in all of this some help, and that was part of the speech, from regulatory and tax incentives, etc. But that would really help consolidate, because there is no doubt in my mind that the competitive advantage for mining innovation sits here in Australia, and we should do everything to foster it.
Richard, I believe you have the next two questions over there, and after that we may call it to a close.
Hi Alberto, my name's Jenny from the AusIMM. Thank you, that was a really great speech. My question is about perception of the public towards the mining industry. Some members of the public can sometimes have a premature view that the mining industry is bad, and as a recognised organisation within the mining industry, and obviously as a leader of said organisation, I'm curious if you've got any thoughts about what the industry should be doing from a public relations point of view to improve this perception and, parallel to that, remaining as an attractive industry to experienced as well as young talent.
That's, again, another very good question, and thank you for that. It is something that us in the mining haven't done that well, and I, again, feel strongly about it. I think mining is well done. So bad mining is very bad. And that should be that it does harm the environment and all of that. And you don't see it much in Australia, but you would see it in some regions of the world. I think most of it, and Australian, would be what I call good and responsible mining. And that really is what moves the world. I sometimes, when I hear those debates, either in private or in probably bigger audiences, and people want all the comforts of life, I say, look around. Everything is mining. Your house, the piece of metal, your power. So you want to go back to where, or you just want to freeze things and nobody else develops? Because that's what mining do. Mining just brings transformation and better standards of living for the developing countries and helps continue our standard of living. So I do think the mining industry has to do a better job at explaining that, and we don't do it that well. We try, but we should do better. Interestingly, I worked in the oil industry, and the oil has, in general terms, a better perception. And I don't know why, because actually, if you look at any large mining operation, it will sit there for 30 years, 99% of the environment, of the people are local, and it really transforms for good a place. Oil, when it comes, and it does good, and we need oil, but it usually doesn't generate much jobs. It's in a platform, whatever, and it's much less labor intensive. So they've actually done something better that we should try to emulate in the mining. And I'm proud to have been in the mining industry. I think we take things from the ground and bring win-win to a lot of people. So we should try to say that more often.
Alberto, one last question, I believe, through the centre here.
Thanks, Robert Nicholson, Alberto. Herbert Smith, Freehills. Thanks very much for your address. You spoke about the mining boom and the fact that it got to 9% of the economy with the capital expenditure that was going into that. There doesn't seem much doubt that the industry got somewhat ahead of itself in introducing a lot of capacity in the expectation of a continued expanding demand for minerals, and included in that is the mining services sector and providers of explosives as well, investing ahead of the curve to be able to deliver what they thought would be needed. Has that surplus capacity now been absorbed in the years that have followed, or are we still on a journey? Where is that at?
what we're seeing now in the industry and our main clients is they're not exploring into new areas that much. They're in brownfield expansions and debottlenecking. And I think that is the right call. I think there's still a lot of, as you say, capacity in the existing infrastructure, and it will be some years until they have optimized it and really derive its full potential. You take my former company, BHP, and its iron ore. Initially, they would say, well, the limit of the infrastructure is 240, then 270, then it's 320 million. So I think it is the right call for the industry and the big miners to really optimize their existing infrastructure before really running into massive expansions. It will not happen. As we see, demand is growing, but at a much more subdued pace. We will never see again what we saw with China. And so under those conditions, it's going to be more about optimizing productivity and debottlenecking. And that's where we'll be for several years.
Great. Lower this, I'm a little bit shorter and at one end there. Members and guests, would you please, to propose a vote of thanks, join me in welcoming the CEO of Swan Global, Lorraine Meldrum.
Well, summing up after listening to Alberto today, reading about him and reading between the lines, I offer some observations. He is a smart analyst. He can wade through a set of spreadsheets and quickly spot an anomaly or something that alerts or raises a question. We could say a helicopter view, but a detailed one. He's very much fact-based, a numbers man, a people's person, a delegator, and someone who has been in and worked in the area of Orica's customers. I could go on with more, but perhaps enough said for today. One could perhaps add there is enough there for us to think positively about the future of Orica. As the share price improves in the future, we may well look back on this day when we had a chance to hear what Alberto had to say and learn more about him. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Alberto Calderon.
A geopic. It's going to be good. I'll put it on for my EXCO meeting with my team. If somebody misbehaves, they'll have better incentives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alberto. Right. Members and guests, on your tables or at registration, you'll find flyers about some upcoming industry events. Briefly, these include the AusIMM is celebrating its 125-year anniversary this year, 2018, and we'll be holding a thought leadership series around Australia and New Zealand in April and May to celebrate and plan for the next 125 years. Flyers are on your tables or at registration, so I encourage you to pick up those flyers and participate. WIMNet, that's Women in Mining. On the 27th of March, WIMNet is hosting an executive networking session featuring Richard Laufman, the CEO of Rex Minerals, who will be speaking on the importance of, quote, male champions of change, end quote. And on the 1st of May, Elizabeth Proust, one of our leading business figures, will be the keynote speaker at WIMNet's boardroom lunch. Details are on the flyers on your table. Members and guests, in the last few days of October and the first few days of November this year, we have IMARC taking place in Melbourne at Jeff's Shed. We had just over 4,000 delegates from 85 countries here last year, and by the sound of it, it's going to be a hell of a lot bigger this year, particularly given that parallel to IMARC will be what we essentially call the AGM, or the biannual meeting of the ICMM, the International Council of Mining and Metals. So that means that the member companies of the ICMM will be represented here by no less than their CEOs. You name those companies, BHP, Rio, Newcrest, MMG, they're the ones that I know in Melbourne, but Vale, right across all of those majors, together their market value rates in excess of $1 trillion and they employ more than 1 million people. They will be here at the same time, so we encourage you to join us at IMARC at the same time as ICMM. Now to the Sovereign Hill Prize. Dan, or got that? A family pass to the evening and sound like blood on the Southern Cross. Remember, members and guests, you need to be here to win it, and we're going to ask Alberto if you would please find us a winner. So we'll see what they've got for us there. Drum roll. That's the first one? Okay. Is there a John McNamara in the room? John McNamara, can I see an arm? John McNamara, there you are. Dan, right up the back there. So I'd encourage you to pop up there with the prize that's here, Dan, on the table. Got it, right. It's a great day up there. Our next lunch will take place here at the Town Hall on Friday the 27th. Remember, Friday the 27th, a bit unusual. This will be the first time, and certainly not the last, that we focus on lithium. Our guest speaker will be the Managing Director of Pilbara Minerals, Ken Brinsden. Pilbara is constructing the Pilgangora lithium project south of Portland in WA as an emerging producer of the key ingredient used in lithium-ion batteries. Pilbara Minerals is plugged into the global electronic vehicle and energy storage revolution. So join us here with Ken's insights into this growing and dynamic sector of the Australian resources sector. That date again is Friday the 27th of April. Flyers will go out soon. If we don't have your details for Luncheon and Cutting Edge series notifications, please leave a business card at the door or register on our website. And you can follow the Melbourne Mining Club on LinkedIn. One thing that I did forget to mention here, and I haven't got the dates, Jen, but the next Cutting Edge series, March 6, details for the Cutting Edge series, which is a great networking event. 6th of March, you can get those on the website or talk to Jenny and the staff on the way out. Also, members and guests, can we retain your name tags? Keeps the costs down. Media, can we see you 5 to 7 minutes' time in the Condell room with Alberto and Michael White? Thank you, members and guests. Travel safely. See you at our next lunch.